I hadn't been back to the ranch in nearly 8 years, not since my father passed and left it to me in a sealed will that most of the town pretended didn't exist. Life had taken me far from this dust and sun place, from wild Texas plains to federal boardrooms and corporate battlegrounds, where I quietly built one of the most powerful real estate technology networks in the country. What nobody knew, not even my closest advisors, was that over the last decade, while HOA boards tightened their grip on everyday Americans and abused power behind closed meetings, I had spent my wealth and knowledge constructing a masterstroke, a silent acquisition of influence, policy rights, and executive control over the largest national HOA management conglomerates through anonymous holding companies and shell firms. I was the man behind the curtain. So when I finally returned to my father's ranch, tucked just outside the town of Oak Ridge Hills, I expected to do so quietly, maybe fix up the barn, watch the sun rise through the orchard, and finally feel some peace. But peace had long left this place. Instead, I was met by a shrill voice yelling across the dirt road, "Excuse me, sir, you're trespassing on HOA-controlled land." I turned and saw her Karen Kingsley. Short platinum blonde bob, oversized clipboard, neon pink HOA vest, and an expression so twisted with authority that it might as well have been carved in concrete. Her eyes scanned me like I was a thief. Behind her were 5 police cruisers idling near the fence, their doors ajar, local officers already placing their hands on their belts as if I were some armed intruder. "Ma'am," I began, calm but sharp, "this is my land, been in my family for generations." She scoffed. "Your name isn't in the registry. I'm the acting HOA president of the Oak Ridge Preserve, which now includes this plot. This land was declared dormant and absorbed by the association due to non-use and unpaid compliance penalties." I could almost laugh. She was quoting bylaws she didn't even understand. The ranch hadn't been dormant. It had been protected. Every inch of it was shielded under a conservation trust I wrote and passed through a federal exemption clause tied to veterans' estate rights, and any attempt to claim it was outright fraud. "I'm giving you 5 minutes to vacate," she barked, signaling the cops. One officer began walking toward me. Another unlatched the fence gate. "We don't want trouble, sir," one said, hand on his taser. But they were already in trouble. Because as the officer approached, I slowly reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek federal lanyard, one reserved for government agency partners, with full interjurisdictional access. "I suggest you all stop right there," I said.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
"Suggest you all stop right there," I said. "You're interfering with federal land." Karen turned ghost white. "F a federal?" I nodded. "Let me make this real simple. I own the land. I also control the board that governs every HOA in your region. In fact, EB." I pulled out my phone, opened a secure terminal app, and tapped 3 times. "Your entire HOA just lost operational authority." It took about 20 seconds. Karen's phone dinged. Then the officers. Then the other. A silence washed over the dirt road as the Oak Ridge Preserve HOA was officially deactivated by my order, suspended by the National HOA Consolidated Trust, which I oversaw as silent majority shareholder. "This is a mistake," Karen stammered. "You can't just—" "I can," I said. And I did. But the real story wasn't about ending her little empire. That was just the matchstick. The real fire started after I stepped inside the old ranch house and pulled the dust cover off my father's desk. Underneath was the folder he'd left me, labeled simply Project Sovereign. Inside were maps, deeds, old letters, and a blueprint for something far bigger. My father had known for years that the town was being swallowed by HOA greed, their bylaws expanding like a virus, reclassifying property, seizing land through voter apathy and fine accumulation. And he had created a way out, a legal framework built on rural sovereignty, tied to state-level provisions that could free hundreds of towns just like this one. He'd never finished it, but I could, and I would. The next day, I contacted my legal team in DC, 5 of the sharpest constitutional property attorneys in the country. Within hours, we had injunctions ready, lawsuits filed, and state attorney generals looped in. I returned to town with a copy of the project in my hand and posted it on the board at the community center. Karen, still clinging to what was left of her authority, tried to tear it down, but I'd already made digital backups and sent certified notices to every homeowner in the region. Then I hosted the first open meeting at the old Grange Hall, no HOA permission needed. Over 200 people showed up, some scared, some angry, all tired of the surveillance fines, the ridiculous lawn color codes, and the security patrols that looked more like private militias. I showed them the receipts, where their dues had gone, who'd been paid off, how the board had rigged elections by rejecting mailed ballots on technicalities. I showed them the videos people being harassed for building tree houses or flying the flag the wrong way. Karen showed up mid-meeting, ranting about illegal assemblies and code violations. I showed her the live stream being watched by over 50,000 people nationwide, including journalists and state officials. "I'm placing you under citizen's notice for civil fraud," I told her. "And tomorrow, the sheriff will make it formal." By dawn, it was done. The HOA charter was revoked. Karen was detained pending investigation. Her emails revealed layers of corruption, kickbacks from contractors, threats sent to disabled homeowners, and even secret files kept on non-compliant families. But I wasn't done. Over the next 2 weeks, I sent a wave of reform plans to over 60 counties across the country. Town after town began requesting help. I created a new non-profit Homestead Liberty Foundation to legally challenge abusive HOAs and restore control to property owners. We opened 5 new offices. My phone rang non-stop. Former HOA enforcers offered to testify. Governors called to discuss policy reform. Even Congress took notice. What began as a simple ranch return had now become a nationwide reckoning.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Simple ranch return had now become a nationwide reckoning. But at night, as I sat on my father's old porch with a glass of bourbon, I knew the real victory wasn't in headlines or handcuffs. It was in the laughter of the kids playing in yards again. The flags returned to front porches. The barbecues resumed without permits. I had come home to a war. I stayed to build a peace. And as the stars spread over the Texas sky, I whispered one thing to the wind. "You picked the wrong rancher, Karen." But the battle didn't just stay in Oak Ridge Hills. After news of Karen's collapse went viral, I received anonymous messages from desperate homeowners in dozens of states, Utah, Colorado, Georgia, even Alaska. Some sent pictures of seized yards and concrete patios bulldozed over minor violations. Others described intimidation tactics, where HOA inspectors showed up armed or with off-duty police, pressuring them to sign away easements. The abuse was systemic. With the Homestead Liberty Foundation now live, we created a national hotline and partnered with legal aid groups in every state. What followed was a tidal wave. Over 9,000 calls in 1 month. Hundreds of ongoing lawsuits. I went on national television to expose the corruption not just in HOAs, but in the cozy contracts between them and private security firms, banks issuing HOA lien mortgages, and even judges who ruled on HOA boards they secretly sat on. My team compiled a report so damning, the Senate Judiciary Committee invited me to testify. I walked into that Capitol chamber wearing boots still dusty from my ranch, laid down Karen's bylaws, and read them aloud. This is what we allowed our neighbors to become, I said. The room went dead silent. Then, questions poured in. Senators demanded reform. Lobbyists panicked. Major HOA investment firms lost billions as homeowners flooded the market with class action filings. But I didn't stop there. Using tech I'd helped develop, we built a software suite Civic Lite that allowed any community to vote, amend, and manage their own neighborhood rules without ever joining an HOA. It ran on blockchain, fully transparent, and unhackable. Within 6 months, over 400 communities had left their HOA charters. Cities across Florida and Arizona signed pilot agreements. The age of HOA empires was ending. And Karen, now facing charges of property theft, coercion, and forgery, became the cautionary face of it all. They even made a documentary. Called it The Rancher That Broke the Boards. I never asked for fame. I just wanted peace. But sometimes, peace only comes when you fight for it loud enough that the whole nation hears. And now, finally, they had. The documentary had barely finished airing when my phone lit up again, this time from a different corner of the country. A town in North Carolina, Ridgewater Creek, where the HOA had not only fined a veteran for parking his RV on his own lawn, but had moved to seize his property entirely. It wasn't just abuse anymore, it was theft in daylight. I didn't hesitate. Within 24 hours, I landed in Ridgewater, where homeowners had started forming human barricades to stop bulldozers the HOA had dispatched. Local media was already circling, but they hadn't connected the dots yet. That would change soon. I met with the veteran, name was Lewis Granger, a former Marine who'd lost a leg in Fallujah. His entire story had been distorted by the HOA. They claimed visual violations and a non-standard construction, when in fact, Lewis had filed for an exemption under Disability Code, and the HOAC board simply ignored it. The HOA president there? Another Karen, this one named Dana Kinsley, no relation to the Oak Ridge tyrant, but cut from the same cloth. She had just bought a Tesla with HOA expansion funds and built a backyard waterfall using HOA landscaping reserves. I confronted her on camera, mic'd up, with a homeowner live streaming every word. When I told her about federal accessibility laws she was violating, she smirked. "This isn't federal land," she said. I pulled out my phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. "Hey Jim, connect me to ADA enforcement." "Yeah, Ridgewater HOA. Today." She turned pale. Again. They always turned pale when they realized I wasn't bluffing. The foundation sued on behalf of Lewis and 12 others. This time, instead of waiting for the courts, we filed for an emergency injunction with backing from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Dana tried to delete HOA financial records overnight, but digital forensics got to them first. The investigation uncovered over $600,000 in misused funds, phantom contractors, and even a secret surveillance drone program. Dana resigned before she could be arrested. Lewis kept his home. The HOA was placed under receivership, with the foundation acting as overseer. Ridgewater's people marched downtown with flags and banners, the same ones Dana had tried to ban. And as I walked through the crowd, people kept stopping to shake my hand, hand me letters, tell me about their own HOA horrors. One man from Nevada had driven 2,000 miles just to give me a USB drive full of documents proving his board was in bed with a private prison firm that wanted to rezone homes into Basel. Transitional housing. It was bigger than I'd thought. This wasn't just...
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Housing. It was bigger than I'd thought. This wasn't just about power-drunk Karens anymore. It was about money, corporate influence, and government loopholes. I returned to Washington and met with a bipartisan panel proposing new federal HOA accountability regulations. We wrote the Community Sovereignty Act legislation that would give homeowners the legal right to override any HOA policy with 60% neighbor consensus and protect landowners from lien threats without tamari. Judicial review. It passed through the House with surprising speed. The Senate took longer. Lobbyists threw everything at it. But the people had seen too much now. The tide had turned. Meanwhile, I travelled to Arizona, where a town called Dustwood Pines had been abandoned after the HOA bankrupted itself and left all infrastructure crumbling. No power. No road repairs. HOA board gone underground. I walked through the ruins with a camera crew. Then we brought in contractors, pro bono engineers, and volunteers from every nearby city. Within 3 weeks, we had running water, working streetlights, and a new local charter without any HOA oversight. CNN called it the community rebirth of the century. We also started a podcast, Unboarded, which exploded in popularity, giving homeowners everywhere a platform to share their stories. The first 10 episodes were downloaded over 10 million times. Stories poured in. A widow in Florida fined $75,000 for wind chimes, a family in Oregon forced to sell their home over a tool shed, and a schoolteacher in Missouri whose heir. HOA declared her entire property out of compliance over wildflowers. My daughter Haley hosted it, bringing her FBI clarity and sharp focus to each episode. Listeners weren't just entertained, they were enraged, and they wanted change. Haley didn't stop there. She worked with state bar associations to create free legal templates for homeowners to fight back cease and desist letters, demand for transparency forms, and procedural challenge packets. We trained over 500 volunteers nationwide. In time, our legal resource hub became the #1 site for homeowners facing abusive HOAs. Cities began inviting us to consult on local ordinances. Some asked us to build whole new charter frameworks from scratch. It was a revolution in real time. One particular case struck deep. A single mother named Rena Wu in California was days away from losing her house all over a solar panel that violated a decades-old aesthetic rule. But her son, just 12, had written to us directly. "Please help us. My mom cries every night. We didn't do anything wrong." Haley read it out loud at a town council meeting streamed by over 100,000 people. By morning, the town had unanimously voted to suspend the HOA's authority and rewrite the bylaws with our team's help. Rena kept her home. And her son? He wrote a follow-up letter saying he wanted to be a lawyer now. Back at Oak Ridge, our once-quiet ranch became a national hub. We called it Liberty Ranch HQ. Journalists came daily. School tours visited. We even launched a mentorship program for young community organizers. We taught them how to track HOA corruption, how to use the law, and most of all, how to never back down. The ranch was full of life again. Where HOA drones once hovered, kids now flew kites. In one final strike, we acquired a data analytics firm and used it to track where HOA violations were most frequent, who was being targeted, and whether bias played a role.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Who was being targeted, and whether bias played a role. The results were damning. Minority homeowners were 4x more likely to receive violations. Seniors and veterans were often hit with inflated fines. We published the data, called for investigations, and had 3 state attorneys general open formal inquiries. Karen, still imprisoned, sent another letter. This time, she apologized, blaming peer pressure and board expectations. We released it anonymously on the Foundation blog, along with a message from Haley. It's not about Karen, it's about the millions of people who couldn't speak until now. That message went viral. And then it happened. A bill passed through both chambers of Congress. The Fair Community Act. It outlawed private enforcement agencies from masquerading as law officers under HOAs, banned secret surveillance in residential communities without warrant, and made it a federal crime to falsify banner. HOA compliance records. President signed it live. We stood there watching, arm in arm, on the steps of the Capitol. Haley saluted. I nodded. No more fake cops. No more kangaroo fines. No more Karens with clipboards and delusions of empire. To cap it all, we built a permanent legal clinic at the ranch. Attorneys from across the country rotated through, offering pro bono consultations to any American battling unjust housing policies. Veterans found hope again. Seniors won back dignity. Young families reclaimed front yards that had long been held hostage by power-hungry boards. Haley began training a new generation of civil defense lawyers not just for HOA issues, but to protect property rights across the board. We created a traveling exhibit called HOA Horrors, The Untold Stories, which toured libraries and state houses. Each room told the story of someone who had been silenced, but who now had a voice. One wall featured photographs of once abandoned homes, now vibrant and lived in, with testimonies beside them. Another showed shredded violation letters, taped back together as artifacts of resistance. And just when we thought it had peaked, we were invited to the White House. Haley was awarded the Presidential Medal of Civil Service. I was offered a seat on the National Housing Reform Council. I declined, choosing to remain with the people. I didn't want a title. I already had what mattered: justice, legacy, and a ranch full of free hearts. It started with one ranch, one gun, one daughter, and one man who refused to walk away. It ended with a movement that put power back where it belonged, in the hands of the people. And every time I walk that ranch trail now, the same trail my father once did, I whisper again to the wind. We didn't just fight back. We won for everyone.